Welcome back. I'm Stephanie Ruhle. Actress Felicity Huffman could be facing jail time after she pleaded guilty yesterday, admitting to federal prosecutors that she paid thousands of dollars to boost her daughter's SAT scores and her chances of getting into a top university. This case highlights the pressure parents and students feel to get into top schools. I don't know if it's pressure. They straight up cheated, something they believe is a sign of success. But entrepreneur and business professor Scott Galloway says this is the kind of thinking that can be wildly dangerous to society. He writes about how to block out the noise and achieve true success in his new book, The Algebra of Happiness, Notes on the Pursuit of Success, Love, and Meaning. My dear friend Scott joins me now. Scott, your book talks, in your book, welcome, congratulations on the book.
Thanks,
you talk about how you got into UCLA and how a state-sponsored education was the key to your success and in many ways happiness. What we're seeing right now is the opposite in every possible way. How did we get here?
Yeah, well, I think as academics, and you have to do the man in the mirror test, and I'm an academic, I think we've lost the script, and that is we used to see ourselves as public servants in love with the unremarkable kids that had remarkable futures, and I was one of those. And we now think of ourselves as luxury goods. Stanford has tripled the number of applicants. It's probably increased its endowment 10 or 12-fold in the last 30 years. But it hasn't increased their first-year seats by 1. We're drunk on exclusivity. So every year, the deans of schools, including mine, get up and brag about the fact that we turned away 80 or 90% of our applicants. And that's tantamount, Stephanie, to a homeless shelter bragging that it's turning away 90% of the people that showed up last night. Our job is to give kids remarkable futures. It's never been a better time to be remarkable in the U.S. It's never been a worse time to be unremarkable. And the reality is that 99% of us and our children are unremarkable. So
by unremarkable, you mean the masses out there, right? I went to public school in New Jersey. Are you saying it's all of those students that unless they're the tippy top or the absolute bottom, we're the ones who are simply going to be forgotten? If I were 18 today, I wouldn't have the chance to pursue the American dream?
So people brag that they would never get into their alma mater now. They brag about that. And that's a bad thing, because on a risk-adjusted basis, your kids are probably going to likely be somewhat in your weight class in terms of character, grit, and intellect, which means that they're not going to go to as good a school as you. And whereas education used to be the upward lubricant of upward mobility, it's now become the sand in the gears. We have a caste system here. It's called higher education. Give me a kid's zip code and where he went to college, and I'll tell you how much he or she is going to make by the time they're 30. So you can understand the pressure that builds on kids and on us to get them into the best schools possible. And quite frankly, it's become a corporate racket.
Well, because we view that giving our kids the chance to live a better life than we did as their path to happiness. You are writing a book about happiness, saying that that's not how you achieve it.
Well, I want to be clear. I do believe that, so there is a correlation. There's great research out there between money and happiness, and there's a correlation between education and money. Despite the fact that Jay-Z, there's very well publicized examples of people who dropped out of college, Jay-Z, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, you should assume you nor your son are Jay-Z. College is still a very good investment. The problem is we've been preying on the hopes and fears of the middle class and racking them up with student debt, and are making it now to the point where sometimes college is not worth the investment. But the money part, there is a correlation between money and happiness once you get to the upper middle class, but then it ends. In other words, once you get decent housing, you can absorb an economic shock, decent health care, a chance to take care of your kids. At that point, happiness levels out. And it's important to keep that in mind, that money is your ink. It's the ink in your pen. It can write different chapters. It can make certain chapters burn brighter, but it's not the story. You have to craft your own story. So my lesson to my kids is in your 20s and 30s, bust a move to economic security. It's really important. There's just no getting around it. And by the way, there's a myth of balance. If you expect to be economically secure in this society, or if you want to live in New York or San Francisco, I would say 20s and 30s is pretty much about working it. But once you get to a certain level of economic security, you need to take a pause and say, what is my story? Because money is just the ink in the pen of your story.
You also talk about bringing love back. And there's a loss of humanity. If college acceptance now is all about numbers and not even personal interviews, if our kids aren't going to parties because they're playing Fortnite with one another while they're sitting at home or living their lives on social media, how do you connect? How do you find love without actual human connection?
Well, the study, the science here is clear. The largest study of its kind on happiness, the Harvard Grant study, they tracked 400 men from the age of 19 until they all died 80 years later. Largest data set longitudinally ever collected on happiness. And the one best practice, if there's one kind of silver bullet around happiness, it's the following. It's the depth and number of meaningful relationships. At work, do you feel respected and admired, and do you admire and respect other people? Amongst your friends, do you get a sense of joy and camaraderie? And do they feel a sense of joy and camaraderie
You
from
will
you?
only feel it if you give it to others.
100%. And the most important thing, amongst your family, do you feel an intense level of support and love? And just as importantly, do you know they feel an intense level of support and joy from you? And it's got the greatest opening line. The largest academic study of its kind on happiness has the best opening line,
which is
of a 400-page academic report, and it says, happiness is love, full stop. But it requires investments. Just as we talk about on these shows, the benefit of making little investments when you're young and compound interest, there's a compound interest to love, and that is little investments every day. Funny text messages, congratulating people, a handshake, a pat on the back. These are small investments, and then you wake up when you're older, and they're profound in terms of the relationships you find you with. What's the singular relationship in everyone's life? Their mother. Why? Because she made those small little investments millions of times over the course of your life.
I love this segment. I love talking to you. Love is always the answer. Thank you so much. You must read this new book by my dear friend, Scott Galloway. You want to be loved? You want to be adored? Start by loving someone else. Just be nice today.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.